They tried to silence me, but I was born to speak for the voiceless. I am Joan of Arc, and my fire still burns.
The year is 1412. France is in ruins. The soil is soaked with blood, the people crushed by war, and the throne of a fractured kingdom teeters on the edge of oblivion. But in the silence of despair, from a small village in northeastern France, a voice is about to rise. A voice that will shake kings. A voice that will ignite a nation. A voice that belongs to a young girl named Joan. Jeanne d'Arc, known to the world as Joan of Arc, was born into obscurity. Her village, Domremy, was small, poor, and forgotten. Her parents were peasants, hard-working, pious, and like most of their kind, consumed by the daily fight for survival. Joan knew no luxury, no education, no politics. Her life revolved around tending sheep, helping her mother, and listening to sermons at the village church. But Joan was different. From a young age, she carried a sense of purpose, a kind of quiet intensity that made her seem older than her years. By the time she was 13, she began to hear voices, strange and clear and unlike any human voice she'd ever known. According to her later testimonies, they were the voices of saints, Michael the Archangel, Catherine of Alexandria, and Margaret of Antioch. These voices told her she had a mission, to save France. France at the time was split and bleeding. The 100 Years' War had dragged on for generations. The English occupied large parts of the north, including Paris. The French crown had been discredited, its prince, Charles VII, dismissed as the King of Bourges, a ruler in title only, backed by a broken court and dwindling resources. The enemy wasn't just England, it was despair. So what did Joan do? She obeyed. She left her village at age 16, traveled dangerous roads to reach Charles's court, and demanded to speak with the Dauphin himself. The soldiers laughed. Priests doubted. The nobles sneered. A peasant girl in men's clothes claiming she was sent by God? Blasphemy. Madness. Yet something in her eyes, something in her voice, stopped them from turning her away. She was examined by theologians, questioned by bishops, and tested by royalty. And still she held firm. I am sent by God to deliver France. And something miraculous began to happen. Charles, desperate for hope, finally gave her a small army, barely more than a band of misfits, and sent her to lift the siege of Orleans. Everyone expected her to fail. But she didn't. Wearing white armor, riding a war horse, and carrying a banner with the image of Christ, Joan became a symbol, a spirit of resistance. Her courage on the battlefield was astonishing. Though she never wielded a sword to kill, she led charges, rallied troops, and walked fearlessly through hails of arrows. Under her leadership, Orleans was liberated in just 9 days. Soldiers wept. The people cheered. France, long buried under the weight of hopelessness, began to stir. Her next goal? To escort Charles to Reims, the sacred site of French coronation, and see him crowned as King of France. And she did. Against all odds, with hostile forces surrounding them, Joan led Charles through dangerous terrain. And when the crown touched his head, the crowd shouted, "Long live the king!" But they knew deep inside it was Joan who had made it possible. But success breeds enemies. The same churchmen who once examined her with curiosity now feared her growing power. The nobles who once scoffed at her now envied her glory. The English saw her not as a saint but as a sorceress, a witch leading an army of rebels. Soon, Joan's fortunes began to fade. In 1430, while trying to liberate Compiègne, Joan was captured by the Burgundians, French allies of the English. They sold her to the English for 10,000 livres. The king she had crowned? Silent. Court she had saved? Absent. Joan was alone. Be at TMN, May 3, 2025, 4:58 p.m. She was imprisoned, chained, and tried for heresy. Not for war crimes. Not for violence. But for claiming that God had spoken to her. For dressing as a man. For daring to lead. Her trial was a sham, loaded with bias, driven by politics, and soaked in fear. Yet Joan, barely 19 years old, stood before her accusers with calm defiance. she said. "If I am not in the grace of God, may God put me there. And if I am, may God keep me there." Her words struck even her judges. But the verdict was already written. On May 30th, 1431, in the marketplace of Rouen, Joan was led to a wooden stake. She was dressed in white. She asked for a cross, and someone handed her one hastily made from sticks. As the fire rose around her, she shouted the name of Jesus again and again. Witnesses said her face shone with light. The executioner wept. Joan of Arc was burned at the stake at the age of 19. But fire could not burn what she had become. Years later, even her enemies admitted she had been wrongfully executed. In 1456, the Church reversed her conviction. In 1920, nearly 500 years later, she was canonized as a saint. Today, Joan stands as a timeless symbol, not just of France, not just of faith, but of courage, of standing for what you believe even when the world calls you mad, of rising when others bow, of hearing a call no one else can hear and answering it with your life. She was a shepherd girl. She became a warrior. She was a peasant. She stood before kings. She had no sword, but she cut through history. She was burned, but not destroyed. She was Joan of Arc,